Okay, good morning everybody and welcome to today's webinar jointly hosted by Google and Search Laboratory. My name's Ian Harris, I'm the CEO of Search Laboratory and I presume everybody knows a lot about Google, but just to introduce Search Laboratory, we're a specialist multilingual digital marketing company. We were founded in 2005 and we offer a range of services: SEO, pay-per-click, analytics and data science, social media, programmatic display, and we were built from the ground up to provide these services in multiple languages. So we have an in-house team of mother tongue search specialists. We run campaigns in over 40 countries, 25 languages in sectors such as retail, travel, tech, finance, manufacturing, to name but a few. So like I say, welcome to the seminar. The goal of the next hour is to share some insight into the market opportunities presented by the UK's decision to leave the EU. So there's lots of speculation and uncertainty in the air at the moment. There's lots of wait and see, but there's things happening right now that we expect to continue that are providing major opportunities for companies in the UK that can sell overseas. And these are largely centered around exchange rate fluctuations. So pre-Brexit, the pound was worth $1.45. Right now, I checked this morning, it's just under $1.30. So the reality of that is that my holiday last week in the US was 10% more expensive for me because I was buying stuff in the US. But the reality for UK companies is that your stuff, your goods and services are now over 10% cheaper to people in the US, and that goes for the euro as well. The euro was 130 pre-Brexit, today 116. I attended a talk by HSBC, their top economist, Mark Beresford-Smith. This was about 3 weeks ago. HSBC expects the pound to settle at around $1.20. There's been some mini surges, but they don't expect those to last. But $1.20, so they expect the pound to fall further. The reality is nobody really knows what's going to happen, where the pound's going to go. But fact is, right now there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity to start selling overseas. So to today's webinar, we're delighted to be joined by Andreas Valencia and James Nesbitt. They're from Google's global agency support team. So they're going to spend about 20 minutes giving us an overview of the global digital landscape and how Google helps support us, so help support Search Laboratory with data to help our clients go global. So they'll be providing insights into opportunities they've seen post-Brexit. So they'll really be looking at what's the opportunity and how do you investigate that opportunity specifically for your company, so for your business. And then following that, we've got our own Pete Whitmarsh, who is head of paid media, who's then going to start talking about, well, how do you do it? What's the best practice recommendations on setting up and optimizing global campaigns, specifically paid search campaigns. And this is based on our 10 years of experience of helping clients expand overseas. Just before we get underway, some housekeeping points. Questions. We'd love to hear your questions. So we've set some time aside at the end, and there's a chat function. There's two ways you can submit questions. One is through the chat function. It should be fairly obvious. There's a little box on the panel at the side. Send us a question through that, or we've got you can use Twitter, and we've got hashtag SLWebinar. If you just tweet any questions you've got to SLWebinar, any that you post through the chat function We'll assume that you want to remain anonymous, but if you want us to say your name, then you can let us know, but we won't read out your name unless you tell us. So you can ask anything you want. We want any question, no matter how daft. The second point is that we're recording this webinar, so no need to take screenshots or write copious notes. We're recording it, and in the next 24 hours you'll get an email with a complete recording, a link to a recording of the webinar. Okay, so without further ado, delighted to hand over to, first of all, Andreas at Google.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Search Lab Google co-hosted webinar. My name is Andreas, and as Ian introduced, I am an account strategist and export lead here at Google, and I'm joined by my colleague, James.
Hi, I'm a development manager. Very proud to be working with specialist and skilled agencies such as Search Labs from a Google point of view.
And we're here today, just to broadly speaking, speak about the borderless opportunity and borderless thinking that we can take out of the current result of the referendum. And mainly just thinking around what are the opportunities, what are we seeing from a Google standpoint in terms of trends, and mainly how can we help you seize this particular opportunity. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to James. He's going to give us a little bit of an overview about what topics we're going to be covering today and just delve directly into the current marketscape.
Yeah, so I'll do a bit of an overview, and then I'll hand back to Andreas to go into sort of more specific things, and then we'll hand back to Search Laboratory at the end. So first thing I want to explore is the kind of UK market status quo. So let's take a little look at sort of where we are, maybe where we're going, and I think this is an important point because where we are now today is not going to be the same place that we're in 2 or 3 weeks. I think there's a lot of velocity and a lot of change happening quite quickly, and it's important to get ahead of that, so not to be in stasis, as Ian kind of alluded to, and instead to kind of make a move and make sure that we are doing the right thing in light of that status quo. The second piece is a bit about digital's role during a period of uncertainty and why digital is a good place to go when there is some uncertainty, because it does bring some concrete signals and sort of, some great data and numbers that you can use with certainty and with confidence. We'll look at seizing the opportunities, what those opportunities are, how to identify them, and how, of course, to grab them and throttle them in the best way. And then, of course, a bit about how Search Laboratory and Google together can help you export. So we'll look at some of the things that Google offers agencies like Search Laboratory in terms of sort of exclusive support and data and opportunities that you can leverage through Search Laboratory. So, moving along. I think we can all agree that the one certain thing that has come out of the decision to leave the EU and Britain is a period of uncertainty. We've heard a lot of sort of fear-mongering. We've heard, opinions from one side of the spectrum to the other about what's going to happen, what's going on. I think something that Google has learned, and that probably all you have learned as well in your lives, are that slowdowns are when winners get ahead. Now, what I don't want to do is imply that we are looking at, global recession. We're certainly not. I don't think we're looking at any kind of UK recession, anything like that. But at the same time, there have been some fairly significant sort of effects from the decision to leave the EU. And what we have looked at before, what we have seen before, is that when there is a recession or there is a slowdown, then this is when sort of online advertising spend tends to grow and sustain high levels of growth in spite of that. And the reasons for that are things that we'll cover. But, the sort of the, as I say, the numeric certainty that digital can bring, the fact that digital brings you qualified leads, all this kind of thing. So we'll move on there. What I do want to also stress is that whilst I'm keen to emphasize, we're not necessarily looking at a recession yet, we are looking at a period of uncertainty. And I think as a kind of microcosm of a recession, this does look like a sort of slower time. There's this uncertainty, so let's get ahead of it. Now, why would one want to use digital marketing? Why would digital thrive during a period of slowdown? I think the first point is obviously flexibility. So you don't have to commit long term. We're not looking at sort of year-out planning or budget assignment cycles. It can be immediately and easily enabled and disabled. And it's responsive. So obviously it responds to queries in real time, responds to signals in real time. Digital has an unparalleled ability to bring you qualified users to convert into, the audience and the consumers and the customers that you want. No other medium really offers that kind of series of informational signals. We also, looking at the numbers, as I've mentioned before, but numbers don't lie. Typically speaking, digital is less expensive, more or less across the board. You do gain superior targeting methods to, say, television or, signs or, I don't know, skywriting, whatever else, but the fact that we can use the digital signals about people's sort of behavior and presence on the internet in order to target them very accurately and, of course, measure the results of those campaigns and the targeting that we do. It really is better for strained marketing budgets if you're being asked, or if you are the person who's having to make decisions about where to cut money, and there's a bit of strain there, then if you can look at your ROI in a way that is sort of numerically sound and accurate, then that's obviously going to be better than wondering which half of your budget is being effective and which half isn't, to use that old adage. And finally, of course, the third important pillar is channel growth, so just device ownership and how that's increasing and is always going up and to the right. I mean, it's no secret Google's told you about 10 times probably that this is the year of mobile. It is, it'll continue, but we are seeing this increased device ownership, increased internet penetration, and increased population that is online and enabled and comfortable, operating in that digital sphere. Of course, digital media consumption is growing, and there really is this great reach opportunity for UK digital advertisers. Depending on the demographic that you're looking at, a lot of the time, digital is really the only way to maximally reach people, depending on that kind of demographic. So that's something that we can definitely look at. So, looking at seizing the opportunity. I mean, you've probably seen graphs like this in the past, but these are just screenshots of the day that the Brexit referendum actually happened, both FTSE and the German DAX index, obviously taking, nothing short of a seismic shock. I think this is very significant. We're looking at sort of all-time 25, 30-year lows. Obviously, that had an impact on currency. And again, you've probably seen these graphs, but it's worth reiterating now. I think, the British pound to dollar, the euro to dollar, again, sort of a 30-year all-time low overnight. But what I would stress is that whilst this was a seismic shock, this did happen very immediately and suddenly, we are seeing recovery happening already. So I think one of the important takeaways today is that the time to strike is increasingly, now. There's going to be a first mover advantage to moving now. What's going to actually happen, as Ian alluded to, the ability for people to buy your products from abroad increases in this situation. So while it's not nice for Ian to go on his holiday and pay extra for his, his beer and his sunglasses or whatever else, it's obviously very attractive for people coming in. So the first mover advantage will favor those who move quickly, who do it now, before we get to the point at which we're sort of back to normal or back to parity. So not a full recession, nothing like it, but definitely a window of opportunity. And I think that low point in the British pound and euro history is not something to be scared of, but rather something to be seized. And this has been covered by the press, so there's obviously a lot of coverage out there, a lot of things being said, but really, this is the time to strike. I won't read these articles to you because you can see them on screen, but certainly this is something that's, there's noise being made about this. It's not just sort of Google telling you this in a vacuum. There is a kind of wider, I think, market-wide sense that to those who are brave and to those who are insightful, this is going to be the time to really move. So I'm going to pass over now to Andreas to get into some of the more specific sort of deep dive side of things.
Thank you very much for that, James. So as James mentioned, what we want to look at right now is looking specifically at what kind of sizable opportunities have arisen from that result, from those currency fluctuations. Something worthwhile highlighting as well. So we did talk about the comparison between the pound and the dollar and the euro and the dollar, but what we've also seen in that kind of currency recovery is that even though each currency has recovered at a steady pace, what's actually happening is the pound still has weakened against the euro. So while we are looking at opportunities across the pond, we should also be thinking about opportunities within the EU because, again, for the next foreseeable 2 years, there's still that favorable trade agreement in which makes trade substantially easier within EU countries. Now, what we want to focus right now is really looking at the kind of retail segment, but not only looking at retail as a whole, but actually the impact that retail or the currency fluctuation has had on retail and traveling. So from the two kind of standpoint opportunities, what we've been seeing is both a surge in international interest in UK products. International interest being primarily from the US and China, but also favorable from some of the EU nations. And obviously that having a knock-on effect on travel, people looking at mega deals from travel holidays, obviously hotel prices going cheaper in the UK, and people trying to come into the UK for holidays. So these are going to be the two main trends that we're going to be discussing. I want to kind of delve a little bit more into what we've been seeing both from an external standpoint and also from an internal standpoint. So again, just wanted to kind of capitalize on what we've been seeing on the press. Again, just some top-line headlines signaling that the biggest trend is coming from both Chinese and American shoppers, and again, predominantly driven by the currency fluctuation. Now, what's interesting to see is that a lot of these international tourists. They're actually combining both the shopping and the travel element. We're seeing a lot of shopping sprees both on e-commerce platforms, but also we're seeing the travel into the UK and that foreseeable increase. So something worthwhile thinking if you're looking to cater these two particular markets as well as EU markets is the impact that it will have on travel, but also once the travel comes inbound, how to target these specific demographics. Now, taking a more kind of historical approach, what we've actually seen is that shopping by international tourists in the UK was actually on the rise. Before any kind of results, before any referendum results, it was actually on the rise, and it was a kind of very, very steady trend. Now, looking at the kind of outlook for 2016 before the referendum, that outlook was still looking positive, and actually post referendum results, the outlook has even further increased. So bottom line is shopping by international tourists is on the rise. It's something that we could be leveraging. And again, it's just trying to find and size the right opportunity there for our own business. So what did we see from an internal standpoint? What were the kind of top trends that we noticed? So first thing is, as we mentioned, goods in the UK became ever more accessible, ever more competitive from a pricing standpoint. And again, a lot of UK retail leading brands that are kind of top of mind household names, they became much more interesting to international buyers. Now, leading up to the referendum, and actually on the week of the referendum, we saw a 17% increase in search volume query. Now, again, we saw this across a lot of the different verticals, that there was an increase and then it tapered off back to normal. But for us, the main thing is that it was a sustained increase. So we saw that 17% sustained increase from outside the UK customers, so people that were non-UK based, potentially in the EU and China and in America, looking for these top household retail brands from the UK. And again, this poses that fantastic opportunity. Currencies are still on the low end. We still have a high search query volume, and it's just an opportunity for us to go ahead and cater to these markets, try to expand our footprint, global footprint, and actually ensure that there's a level of growth coming in from our business. Now, as I mentioned, one side of it is the retail segments, what is actually happening in that spectrum. The second angle is looking at the influx of international travels. Same kind of concept. What we're looking at is a kind of angle where a lot of hotel prices, a lot of airline prices, it became progressively cheaper just based on the currency fluctuation. And same kind of approach, we're seeing a lot of Europeans moving to the UK for short-term weekend holidays. We're seeing a lot of international travels picking top destinations in the UK like the Lake District or London just for kind of extended holiday. And again, this has just been mega deals that are fueling both the travel and the retail segments. Now, this is all great in terms of what the opportunities. We saw the same kind of query spikes, sustained query spikes, but we also need to think about, okay, there's this foreseeable short-term opportunity in terms of what's actually going to happen within targeting the US and EU and our kind of same language countries like Australia. But what we also need to think about is what might it mean for us within the next 2 years as a kind of mid and long-term strategy. So looking outside the EU for export. The silver lining is, while we have a window of say relatively steady trade agreements with the EU, at the end of the day, we are foreseeing that there's going to be more beneficial trade agreements with countries like the US and Australia. Now, if we take a look back, those are pretty substantial markets. Although they don't make up the size of the EU, they're still heavily influential markets for us, and it's actually a way to kind of start catering our strategies there. So if there's any time that we're seeing an influx of traffic from the United States, in terms of us even testing out those markets that we have never exported to the US, it's a perfect time to start testing out the market, see what kind of traction we get, because we can plant that seed now and then move forward in the next 6-7 months and see whether or not it makes sense to actually launch a full-fledged digital strategy in these countries. So silver lining is the US and the UK trade deals, as well as Australia and UK trade deals, are going to be much more beneficial in the long term. So with that being said, we just wanted to kind of pinpoint the top line opportunities that we noted, but we also want to just talk about the collaboration that Google has with SearchLab in terms of how we can help you export and how we can help you expand your digital strategy through Footprint. So from a Google standpoint, we have a 3-pillar step export model, and that is an identification stage, which is looking at new opportunities, looking at which countries or which markets might be interesting for us to enter, looking at the engagement, so trying to understand the audience in the country a little bit better. As one can imagine, taking a strategy from a UK market and implementing it in a European market might not necessarily be the right thing, as audiences are very different. The way they engage and consume media also changes. And we want to make sure that we're tailoring and crafting a strategy that's suitable for the new market. And finally, the execution. So really trying to understand how to enter the market, not necessarily just translating, but actually looking at things further broad, so looking at localization, really adopting the local market Intel. So we're going to talk about these three pillars, and what we thought we'd do today is really look at this in a very practical way. So what kind of level of support are we providing Search Lab in terms of our insights, and again, things that you can access through Search Lab in terms of trying to capitalize on this footprint expansion opportunity off the back of the results. So the first thing, identify market prospecting. Something quite solid. First thing you're going to be looking at when trying to enter a new market is which markets are the most capable for us. What we usually do is do a kind of overlap of query volume, market interest, and overall just trying to get a round picture of the organic demand outside the kind of home market for us. So we're taking away outside the UK here. What we're going to be looking at is which markets or similar language destinations might be interesting for us to target. Now again, as we mentioned, the angle of today is looking at opportunities outside the UK, so the likes of our top European destinations, both looking at the United States and China, and as well as Australia. Is there any kind of market opportunity? From this sample client, what we can actually note is there is a kind of vested interest in the United States, again, similar interest in China and Australia, and again, some of the kind of leading European countries such as Spain, Netherlands, which again might come in as relatively interesting market prospects for us to kind of pilot our growth strategy. Next thing, as I mentioned, is really trying to understand our countries and the audience within our countries. So for this particular reason, we actually decided to pick a market that might not be as apart as the UK would be, for example, with the likes of the US. We actually decided to pick a country that's actually much more developing a digital trend, so kind of a spiraling digital trend upward, which in this case was Spain. So as we mentioned, first thing, let's start off with the kind of EU single currency weakness trend. As I mentioned before, off the back of the results, what we actually saw was there was a hit against the euro as well, but again, that has been recovering in relation to the pound. The dollar still remains stronger, but again, that kind of currency fluctuation still favors us to enter this market to a certain degree because their currency is stronger, therefore our products still are more accessible to European nations. Second thing is we need to look at, if we're going to enter this market, one of the easiest ways to do it is across e-commerce, right? So e-commerce penetration has been on the growth for Spain. This is the kind of stuff that we can pull off data not only for this country but for different countries. But we want to understand whether these countries are prone for cross-border transaction, whether they're likely to go to the UK and actually expand, and which are the leading countries. So again, Spain in this particular instance, we saw that the UK and the US were the leading recipients of cross-border activity, in which case it makes a compelling case for us to think UK close proximity, why not cater to this market? And finally, we need to think about what is going to be our entry strategy based on the media consumption approach. And what we're actually seeing is that Spain, in this particular case, and we can kind of pinpoint this against some different markets like Germany and France, but looking at the uptake of device ownership and device behavior. And in this particular case, we're seeing that mobile shopping activities are the main driver over the next couple of years. So we might want to think about adopting a mobile-specific strategy as opposed to looking at different countries where they might be having a desktop kind of e-commerce-centric strategy. And again, this is the kind of insight that we can provide you not only for this country but for a range of countries when we're trying to scope out which will be the right market to kind of take into our opportunity sizing off the back of this retail search that we're getting. Now, the second kind of key element in terms of our engaging the audience is now looking more of an inbound point of view. So from a Google standpoint, which markets both hold a good level of competition, are relatively more affordable to enter, and can see a kind of high level of volume demand for a particular vertical or for a particular type of business, right? So these are the kind of analysis that we provide to Search Laboratory in terms of what would be an interesting market. But what we tend to do is look at three key metrics. First one there is Google CPCs. So again, what is the average cost of entering this market? Pretty straight no-brainer. That's essentially going to determine how expensive in relation to other markets it is to enter. Therefore, is it more affordable to enter than for the likes of the United States, UK, Germany, or Spain in this case. The second thing is our Google query depth. For us, query depth is a metric of competition. So in other words, when a query is inputted, on average, how many ads would particularly show? The lower the query depth, say, the less competitive the ad space is. And finally, we're going to look at query volume. So for our particular client, for our particular industry, how big is the overall volume for the type of query that we're getting? Now, obviously, what we want to be looking at here is a relatively big bubble. I mean, again, probably not as big as you're going to get for the United States due to sheer size of the country, but you're going to look at a kind of big bubble with a low CPC and a low query depth. And as we've highlighted here, we're looking at potential focus markets like the Netherlands, France, and Spain, which might be interesting markets for us, where it's a little bit less expensive and a little bit less competitive in the UK, and still hold substantial volume that we can actually pilot out in export strategy. Now, we come to the kind of third pillar there. Once we've kind of highlighted how we're going to enter the market, we know a little bit of grasp around the audience and what kind of behavior they have. Next thing is how to enter, how to execute the market. Now, it doesn't go without saying that Search Lab's specialization in terms of executing digital strategies is stellar, and they have a great track record there. And again, probably worthwhile highlighting that Google does support them with localization services. What we actually do is we make sure that there is a localized campaign. So create the campaign for that particular country and fine-tune the campaign to make sure that it caters to that language's business and make sure that we're kind of performing at top scale. So to kind of summarize what James and I have been speaking over the last, let's say, 15, 20 minutes, we just want to kind of give you a little idea in terms of what is kind of the big opportunity here. So we talked about this idea of a slowdown. Now, we don't want to call it a slowdown or a recession, but we want to make sure that there is this period of uncertainty, and that poses a great opportunity for us to actually get ahead. And again, when we talk about getting ahead, it's really talking about, digital has been king in the past. Digital has helped us thrive in periods of uncertainty, but also think about growth objectives. So there is a window where we can actually look at one or two trends that might actually favor our business. Can we capitalize on these? And again, use the kind of angle of responsiveness and flexibility to kind of drive this particular growth. And again, that kind of comes down to the three main opportunities that we talked about there. So we have the inbound travel of internationals, we have a retail boom, so again, international retail boom, and again, there's even other kind of smaller trends there, like local travel also having a boost, so kind of the idea of staycations and whatnot. There's a lot of opportunities around this area. We just wanted to highlight the top two, but again, please reach out to Search Lab in terms of any other opportunities. We'll be happy to provide you some more insight there. But I think the final thing there is just knowing that once you decide to work with Search Lab, you have our Google unsupported, say, Google undevoted support in terms of helping you on your export strategy, and mainly you have access to all of our localization tools. So with that being said, we'd like to thank you for listening to us, and we'd like to pass over to Peter Whitmarsh, who's going to give you a little bit more of an insight in terms of what Search Lab does.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Andy and James. So yeah, that's been a really useful insight in terms of where Google can help and also the market trends at the moment. So that's kind of the why you should do this. So I'm going to delve into a bit more of the kind of how you actually go about doing this. So just to properly introduce myself, my name's Pete Whitmarsh, Head of Paid Media at Search Laboratory. So I've been there for just over 6 years now, heading up PPC, display, video and social advertising. And as Ian said, we're a large digital marketing agency. We've got offices in the UK and the US, and supporting clients all around the world in all sorts of different languages. We also work across a range of different industries. So as you can see here, there's several sort of B2B clients and B2C across both retail and travel. So yeah, the services that we offer kind of span different verticals. So just to kick off, I wanted to share some facts and figures about international markets, so kind of adding on to a bit of what you've already seen from Google. So firstly, this shows average cost per clicks on Google in a variety of countries, so just looking across Europe in this case. And this is all normalized data, so the UK shows us 100% here. We're using that as a benchmark and comparing the other countries to the UK. And you can see here actually the UK is the most expensive cost per click in terms of all the developed markets across Europe. In particular, France always stands out to me on this graph. France, you would only be paying on average sort of 41–42% of what you're paying in the UK for an average cost per click on Google. So there's huge opportunity there. It's the third biggest economy in Europe. But yeah, all those other countries you can see on the graph as well, cheaper clicks than you paying in the UK on average, so big opportunities. I did also look into the US, Australia. They're both a little bit more expensive than the UK actually, so that's not to say there aren't big opportunities there, there absolutely are, but in terms of cost per clicks there's maybe not such an immediate win there. If you're looking at countries like China and India, then the cost per clicks are extremely cheap. You're typically talking about 10% of what you pay in the UK or even less than that in certain instances. So yeah, that's kind of one immediate reason why you should look overseas, is that you can actually find traffic a lot cheaper than you would in the UK. This graph highlights the percentage of retail conducted online in the same European markets. So this is looking at, out of all the retail that happens in those markets, what percentage of that actually happens online as opposed to in-store or over the phone or any other medium. And here you can see the UK is leading the way by quite a distance, followed by Germany, and there's countries like Italy and Spain are lagging behind quite a bit here. So whilst that might mean there's maybe not as much of an immediate opportunity, or at least the same immediate volume available in some of these other markets, it does mean there's a huge opportunity in terms of growth. There's absolutely no reason whatsoever why these countries wouldn't be at the same level as the UK in the upcoming years. So yeah, there's huge growth potential here. So as Andy and James alluded to, kind of getting in there as first mover has a big advantage in these situations. So I've looked next at some of the top reasons why people don't buy from international sites. So this is from a Google tool called Consumer Barometer. It's a really useful tool, has all sorts of data about user behavior in different countries. And these are the top reasons why people aren't buying from international sites. So in France, people say the top reason they wouldn't buy from an international site is that they simply don't trust international sites. So if you're exporting to France, then you'd want to take that into account, and you'd want to think, how can you overcome that barrier? So that might be through showing off awards that you've won, offering certain guarantees, reviews, testimonials, anything to help to really build up the trust of the customer in France. In Spain, they say the top reason is simply that it never occurred to them. So maybe that's quite a hard one to overcome, to be totally honest. But of course, just making sure you're present there and giving people a good reason to buy from you. In Germany, their top reason is that they feel they've got local sites that meet the needs of meet their needs. So they feel like German sites are able to offer everything that English sites or other country websites would offer, so they have no need to buy from a foreign website. So of course, if Germany is then the market that you're looking to enter, you'd need to think about, how do you position yourself, how do you convince a German person that your company is better than what their local companies can offer, and offers a better product range, better pricing, better service, whatever it is, any kind of unique selling points that you can do to stand out above the local competition. A couple of others that stood out when I was doing this research: both Spain and Germany had returns as a big concern, so they're concerned about the cost and the practicality of actually returning products that they buy online. Spain and France had customer service as a big concern, so yeah, actually how they are serviced if they have a problem or something like that. So yeah, with all of these factors, it's important to make sure, if you are going into these countries, you're actually being quite upfront about these and really trying to tackle those before they become a problem for someone. So be really clear about your selling points, about your returns policy, about the customer service that you offer. So why paid search? I'm obviously head of paid media. I'm looking after PPC at Search Laboratory, and this is quite a big topic for the webinar. Is, you know, this webinar is about how to digitally take advantage of currency fluctuations. So why is paid search the thing that you should actually use to do that? And there's four main reasons that I'd identify. Firstly, speed. It's actually really quick compared to other marketing channels to get a paid search campaign up and running. You can get immediate exposure from that campaign. There's no sort of waiting for it to bed in or anything like that. You immediately start getting traffic, and yeah, you can get initial data to kind of prove the case one way or the other as to whether a market's going to work for you. The cost compared to a lot of other advertising channels and other marketing channels is lower. There's no minimum spend that you need to use on Google AdWords or other search engines. So it's quite simple to get up and running and quite low cost. The big one really is results. Typically PPC is most companies' highest performing, or at least one of their highest performing advertising channels. So really, if PPC isn't going to work for you in a market, then probably nothing is. So by using PPC as the first step, you're kind of proving the case of whether your business can actually function in a particular market. And finally, flexibility. As James alluded to, it's very easy to kind of switch on, switch off campaigns. There's no minimum commitment required, so it's quite a flexible channel compared to some others. So next, how to actually discover new markets. Andreas kind of demonstrated some of Google's tools there. There is actually a free Google tool that you can use online, which is called the Google Global Market Finder. So what this does is it uses the power of Google Translation and Google's keyword planning tools to actually help to uncover opportunities in other markets. So you go onto the tool, you choose your location and your language, you then give it a keyword or some keywords that you want it to focus on. In this example I've used tents, so if you're a business looking to sell tents in foreign languages and foreign countries, and then you can choose the filter, so have a look at which countries you actually want to pick. So here I've gone for Europe, but there's all sorts of different options in that filter list. That'll then give you an output that looks a bit like this, so it's showing what are the opportunity scores in different countries, and that opportunity score is made up of a combination of the search volume, the recommended bid, and the level of competition in those countries. So here it's suggesting Spain is the top because there's a high search volume and really low competition, so you could potentially dominate that market. Germany's also a big opportunity there, very high search volumes, very low bid prices as well actually in Germany in spite of the high competition. So yeah, this is a great tool for kind of helping you to kind of take those first steps and really understand what are the potential countries that I should be looking at. One thing I would say is just be a little bit careful with this. Since it is using translation tools, there's no quality checking or anything like that, so it can run into problems. For example, here when I actually expand out Spain and look at Spanish, it gives me the word tienda, which actually, as well as meaning tent in a certain context, it would typically mean store or shop. So yeah, of course you wouldn't want to be bidding on that as a keyword if you were just selling tents. You need to be very careful about what this tool is actually suggesting to you. And similarly, Italian at the bottom there, tenda means curtain in Italian. Again, it can mean tent, but you'd want to be careful about bidding on that keyword or seeing that keyword as an opportunity when there's actually quite a lot of ambiguity with the meaning there. So yeah, I'm not showing you that to take away from the value of this tool. It is still a really valuable tool, but just make sure you are actually verifying that the opportunities that it's showing you are actually genuine opportunities, and it is kind of giving you the correct language that you should be bidding on. So next up I wanted to talk about how to actually practically go about entering a new market. You've used the tools to identify which markets you should be going into. So how do you actually enter a new market? The one big thing to consider for me is this, thinking global but acting local. So what I mean by this really is that a huge part of succeeding internationally is about either convincing someone that you are a local company, so showing all the right signs that you are actually a local company and not even having them realize that you might be based elsewhere, or at least kind of making sure you're demonstrating that you know, respect and can service all of their needs and requirements. So whatever it is that they need as a local person in Germany, France, Spain, US, wherever it is, you can service that as adequately as a local player would be able to. So yeah, that's a huge part, and with everything that you do, this is the kind of ethos that you need to take into it, whether that's your website, your advertising campaigns, your kind of logistics and everything like that. So yeah, moving on to a bit more detail about that, logistics, you need to localize these. So things like payment methods, delivery, customer service. Payment in particular can be a bit of a complicated one because certain countries do prefer different payment methods. So Germany, for example, a lot of online payments are done by invoice. In a lot of the Middle East and Russia, a lot of online transactions are cash on delivery. So yeah, there's certain challenges to overcome there, but it's important to make sure you research those and are delivering the same kind of service that a local player would be able to deliver. Yeah, of course, the actual shipment of products is going to be important. You need to make sure you can deliver in a timely manner and cost-effective manner. And customer service, of course, is hugely important, making sure that if people do have queries or problems that you can actually address those and not end up with bad reviews off the back of poor customer service. Another huge part to think about, of course, is the website. I would always say don't ever just try sending traffic to an English website from a foreign language search query. It doesn't work. We've tried it. It really doesn't work. The absolute best result you're going to have is you might get a small amount of conversions, and then you'll say, well, actually, I might as well just localize the website anyway. Worst case scenario, you get no conversions, and you say, well, of course I'm getting no conversions because it's not localized, so I'm going to localize the website anyway. So, and whichever direction you go, you are going to end up needing to localize the website. There's several considerations with the website. So this graphic I've got on screen here is from a blog post that one of our technical SEO guys did about the kind of pros and cons of different domain structures. There's a link to that at the bottom there. Don't feel like you have to write that down. It'll be sent across with the recording. Also need to think on your website about trust signals, localizing the content. So again, don't just think you can translate English content. Actually think about what is it that someone in that particular language, that particular country would want to see from a website. Another huge part is looking at the competition. So look at the local competition when you're entering a new market. Try and understand their business model, their unique selling points, how they market themselves and try and position themselves against others. And then you really need to think about, well, how do I position my business against theirs? It might be that your unique selling points that you're using in the UK aren't so unique in Italy. There might be other companies who are already doing what you're doing. So yeah, always have a think about what you can do to kind of set yourself apart from the competition and really stand out. And an important part of this is actually genuinely putting yourself in the mindset of a potential customer and really thinking about what would you want and what would, you know, where would you buy from if you were doing a particular search on Google, for example. Which links would you be clicking on, which websites would be the most appealing to you, and really trying to understand and uncover that to put yourself in the strongest position possible. So one thing we talk about a lot at Search Laboratory is localization. We always try and avoid the word translation because translation tends to mean taking a like-for-like sort of mirror image of something and just putting it into a different language. Localization is about taking a lot of further considerations such as these ones you see on screen, language, images, currency, addresses, sizing, unique selling points, and actually localizing these and really kind of thinking about addressing that local market rather than just directly translating. So I've got a few examples for some of these. Other ones on here like addresses. Address forms on websites can often trip people up. I know I've been on retail sites before where it's asked me for a zip code and, well, I don't have a zip code, I live in the UK. Sizing can be an issue, particularly in sort of fashion retail, where the metric system, of course, is going to lead to different sizing, but also shoe sizes are completely different in the US, the UK, the rest of Europe, China. So yeah, there's all sorts of considerations that you need to take into account there. Of course, taking local currency payments is important and actually the most important thing when it comes to thinking about taking advantage of the currency fluctuations. You need to be taking payments in local currency. So yeah, just to go into a bit more detail on language, I've actually pulled together an example here just of if you're exporting to the US, because it's quite a simple one to explain. Of course, the language in the US is different to the UK, so if you're an estate agent, you don't want to call yourself an estate agent in the US. If you're selling jumpers, mobile phones, if you've got an autumn sale on, even delivery, the US almost exclusively use shipping rather than delivery. So yeah, make sure this is localized throughout your website and advertising strategy. And all it takes is kind of one small mistake on one of these to really give the game away and make people not trust you so much and not think that you are able to cater to their local needs. Another one, of course, make sure you're changing your S's for your Z's. So yeah, whatever it is, spellings, names of products, anything like that, make sure it is localized. When it actually comes to creating a Google AdWords account, a big part of get a successful Google AdWords and search strategy, even if that's across Baidu or Yandex or other search engines is getting the right keywords. And again, you shouldn't translate a list of keywords. You need to localize the list of keywords. If you just translate, then you will end up missing terms out. You'll end up with ambiguous terms, such as in the tense example that I showed you. You could end up duplicating keywords. You'll end up with bad structure in your AdWords account. So yeah, there's all sorts of reasons why you shouldn't do it. What we typically do is build from the ground up. So rather than taking an English campaign and using that as a starting point, we'll actually start. We'll say to a German person, can you build up a strategy in German for us, for example. Another part of this is making sure you get your ads right. Again, these need to be built from scratch. Think about your unique selling points. Think about what's important to a culture. I've got an example here of some car hire ads in the UK. If you were to translate these into German, and this is doing a proper translation. This isn't just like an automated translation. If you do a proper translation of those, you're going to end up way over the character limits for Google AdWords, so that's immediately a factor that's going to prevent you, but also, yeah, those unique selling points that you're saying there maybe aren't the things that are important to a German as well, so you need to localize those. Cultural considerations are huge, so for example, if you were promoting a get 50% off buy now in one of your adverts, then that's quite typical in the UK. People do that a lot. It's the same in the US and Australia, but if you were doing that in certain other countries, in Russia for example, that would be considered an extremely aggressive message and really would turn people away from your website that wouldn't want to click on an advert like that. So you'd need to tone it down and really kind of soften the message that you're leading with there. Similarly, designed and manufactured in the UK could be a huge selling point if you're selling into the UK, but maybe in other countries they wouldn't think of UK design as being particularly appealing or UK manufacturing processes as being as robust, for example. So yeah, again, need to think about, is that actually a selling point in the other countries that you're entering? A more obvious one here, great gifts for Christmas. Of course, if you're exporting to a non-Christian country, then that wouldn't be a particularly appropriate message. When it comes to images, that was one of the factors I had on the localization list, which maybe isn't quite so obvious. Making sure you get the images right on a website is really important as well. This is a video conferencing company that we used to do some work with. This was their US landing page that we designed for them, and when we wanted to localize that landing page into French, the thing that the French team immediately told us was that image just isn't appropriate at all. You wouldn't see French people actually celebrating in the office and whooping and hollering on a video conference. So we had to use a rather more toned down image for the French landing page, so that's the one you see on the right. So yeah, it's as big of a consideration as the language, is making sure you do get the images right as well. There's several examples of where companies have got this completely wrong, so I've just got these in as some slightly more amusing examples and things that you really should try to avoid. So KFC, for example, their slogan, of course, of finger licking good. When they entered the Chinese market, they did a translation of this slogan, and it somehow got translated to eat your own fingers. So yeah, not the best slogan that they could have run with there. The other way around, Swedish company Electrolux, when they started selling their vacuums into the English markets, this was the slogan that they started using in English. So again, not the best, and a good reason why they should have had that checked by an English person and not just gone with the translation. So the final thing I've got is just some success stories. So some of our clients who've done this well and where we've been able to help them out to expand to new territories. So firstly, Burton Snowboards are a massive snowboard company based in the US. They were doing extremely well in the US but needed to roll out their brand to further territories. They're already in the UK, and they'd kind of started rolling out in Germany and France when we started working with them. But we've helped them to establish themselves in more territories, and by doing that, as well as optimizing the campaigns, we've managed to significantly increase traffic and conversion rates, but most importantly, more than double their revenue year on year by entering these new markets. One thing to note with the Burton campaigns is that when we first took them over, these had been translated, so they were very symptomatic of that. There was poor keyword selection, badly written ad texts. It was just absolutely symptomatic of an English campaign that had been translated into French and German as opposed to one that had been built from the ground up. We've got a B2B example here with Hootsuite. So if you're not familiar with Hootsuite, they are a huge social media management and analytics platform. And yeah, we've helped them to expand into several different languages. Started off with Germany and Spain, and then since then expanded to France, Italy, Netherlands, Portugal, and Turkey. And yeah, you can see from the chart on the right there the amount of growth that they've had through these markets, kind of significant increases in the number of sign-ups they're getting, but also a reduction in cost per conversions due to the efficiencies of the campaigns, but also due to finding some cheaper clicks elsewhere as well, which has led to higher performance. So yeah, huge success for them, and yeah, really good example of why you should be looking at further countries. So the final thing I've got is next steps. So wherever you are in this journey at the moment, if you're already kind of on your way or if you're just thinking about going international, then we're more than happy to support you with that. One thing we can help with is just helping you to establish which countries actually would be the best target markets for you. So really doing a deep dive with Google's tools and with our tools to help you understand which countries would actually be the most appropriate. We can also provide a full market entry report, so this would be actually looking at trends in different countries, looking at the competitors, the language that's important, any barriers, kind of typical user behaviours, and reporting back to you on that to give you a strategy of how you should enter a market. And then of course actually setting up and ongoing management of PPC campaigns as well as programmatic display, social, SEO, and understanding all the data behind that through our data science team as well. So yeah, that's where we can help out. And that is all from me. I'm going to pass back to Ian now, who should be able to field all the questions.
Okay, so yeah, we've only got 3 minutes, so we have had a few questions. If we don't address any of your questions, we'll get back to you individually. So just a couple I think we've got time for. One here, responding to currency fluctuations. So the currency's all over the place. I think this is probably for you, Pete. How quickly can we respond? And I suppose this is around feeds and feeding that into your bid strategy, but can you just kind of fill us in on how we would do that, Pete?
Sure, yeah. So I think what you're getting at here is as currencies fluctuate, that might impact the budgets and the bid prices that we want to be running with on certain platforms. So yeah, of course it is important to react to that and make sure that the strategy is kind of constantly evolving and changing as the currencies change. One way that we've gone about doing this is through using scripts through the API of Google and Bing and other search engines, which actually allows us to take third-party data, so we can take data from currency websites and feed that into the strategy and actually use that to adjust the bid prices that we're running with on a search engine in sort of real time, reacting to those currency fluctuations.
Okay, perfect. So thanks for that. What's the best way of translating a site for a new market quickly? There's a big topic actually. Translating quickly. There's a number of tools that use proxy-based systems that will enable you to translate websites quickly. There's good and bad in this, and it depends on individual circumstances. If you're a retail site, you can get some dead ends with these systems. So I think probably for that one we'll follow up with you individually because it's quite a big topic. And I'm just looking at the time. I think we're out of time. So Any other questions, we'll get back to you individually. I just want to say thank you for joining us. Thank you to Google. So thanks to the team over there for joining us and supporting us on this webinar. And just in summary, you know, this currency fluctuations, now's the time. The currency's fluctuating all over the place. Searches are staying the same. In actual fact, for inbound, for our kind of specific searches for UK products, Andrea said searches are indeed 17% up, and that's sustained. So going global, now is the time to do it. And I think the other message is it's probably easier than you think, especially with paid search, but do it properly. Make sure you do it properly. So get help with this. If you need anything, if you need any help with going global, as Pete said, market insights, market entry reports, if you want us to audit your current multilingual campaigns or any general help or advice on going abroad, let us know. That's it. Thank you for joining, everybody, and have a great rest of Friday and weekend. Thank you.